Hi, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday Talks at Cure. I'm Seema Kumar. Today, we have the honor of having Dr. Bill Haseltine with us. He is one of the greatest pioneers in biotechnology. Bill is a renowned scientist, entrepreneur, executive, investor, author, philanthropist, and so much more, and well known for his seminal work in the arena of cancer and HIV/AIDS, and as founder of Human Genome Sciences and CEO of Human Genome Sciences, a topic that's very close to my heart, Human Genome Project. And he also founded more than a dozen biotech companies and has had the honor of shepherding 8 pharmaceutical products currently approved on the market. Time magazine named him one of the 25 most influential global business executives. And today, Bill is the chair and president of Access Health International, which is working to ensure that quantum advancements in medical technology translate into improved health outcomes globally. He's also an internationally recognized expert on COVID-19. Bill is the author of more than 200 peer-reviewed manuscripts and 11 books, including his latest called My Lifelong Fight Against Disease, from Polio and AIDS to COVID-19, and Better Eyesight. His blog, BioFutures, is a great source of information on recent advancement in biomedical sciences and a wide range of related topics. He also contributes to Forbes magazine. Bill, welcome to Cure, to the Innovation Campus. It's truly an honor to have you here.
Well, that was a super introduction. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank the audience who's taken some time from the most beautiful day we've had this year. When you look outside, you look at the trees in bloom. It's very nice of you to come in, and thank you for that. Also, a number of you are friends from many years, over many years. You don't even want to remember how many years. And various companies that have been involved, and so it's a very special
yes,
time, and you've got a marvelous facility here. It's a great pleasure to be
Thank you. You'll have to come back and take a full-fledged tour. And we're going to quickly get into some of the phenomenal work that you've done, both in your company, Access Health. But I want to just ask you about an exciting new announcement that was just made today by Access Health, right? It's a formation of a new alliance dedicated to global elimination of Hep C, hepatitis C virus. You're bringing together researchers, healthcare providers, government agencies, patient advocacy groups, all in a united effort to eradicate, diagnose, treat, ultimately, get rid of Hep C. Tell us more about it. For some reason, I thought we were done with Hep C, but it's not.
Hep A and Hep B, yes,
yeah.
We have vaccines. Hep B is still a problem in some parts of the world. But let me say, first of all, it's a biotechnology story, so it's a good story for here. And some of you might remember the company that created the first effective cures for hepatitis C. Then it was purchased, the company, the drug was purchased. When it first came out, it cost $80,000. And now you yourself, if you have hepatitis C, can get it for only $20,000 in the US. However, if you're in Egypt, it costs you $39. If you're in India, it costs you $25. All right? That gives you an idea of some of the issues. One of the things I work on with Access Health is access to good health care. But part of the access to good health care is the price.
Yes.
Right? And I got very interested through Access in these issues. And I was looking at what they were doing in Egypt. I went there 3 times to look at the program. The World Bank gave the Egyptian government a small grant, $250 million. It wasn't a grant, it was a loan of $250 million. They took that, and the woman who works for me now was a health minister. She and the president of Egypt decided they were going to use that to eliminate hepatitis C, and in 8 months they did it.
Wow. It
was the highest incidence in the world. People got it by using basically dirty needles for vaccination of kids. And I studied it in great detail. I wrote some scientific articles about it. I've written a book about it called Hepatitis C, and there's fundamental lessons about what you need to eliminate a disease like hepatitis C.
Yeah.
Now, Hala Zahid, we hired for Access Health. And she's now running our MENA region, which is the Middle East and North Africa. And that's a very important program. Certainly the White House, our White House has announced a program to eliminate hepatitis C from the United States for about $11 billion.
Wow.
Okay, and I don't think they'll be successful. It's not going very well at all. So it can be done, but in this book we outline the 7 things you need to do.
So why is the economics so off? I mean,
it's the difference between $37 and $20,000
yeah,
per dose, for a
Yeah.
3-month dose. Also, when you look at it, there was Abbott finger stick for are you seropositive? That was
Yep.
50 cents.
yeah,
When did you get a 50-cent
diagnostic, yeah.
The PCR that was provided by Roche was $5. When did you see, you go up the street, it's $200 for a PCR test for COVID.
Yep.
And so that's one of the reasons. The other one is just organization. Egypt is famous for maybe 5,000 years of being able to organize. Now, you might not think that when you go to Cairo today, but they have a very good organization. And when you have the president and the health minister, and you have the knowledge, and you have the right price, you can do a lot for very basic health problems. And that's one of the things that I think that is important, that Hollywood would like to work on Africa and other countries. And I think there's only one other country, maybe Georgia, the country of Georgia, not the state,
Yeah.
the country, that has eliminated hepatitis C.
Yeah.
But if you want to take a look, we have a book, it's on Amazon, and you can find it. It goes through it in great detail. And the lessons that you can learn from that. But
That's
thank
a
you
great,
for
that's a great story because it can be done.
It can
with
be done.
political will, with the right economics, with the
Well,
right.
first of all,
Yeah.
you have to have knowledge about the
Yes.
disease.
Yeah.
And so that's where the academics come in.
Yeah.
Then you have to have the pharmaceutical, in this case the biotech industry, come up with the answer. Then you have to have a healthcare system that can take care of the whole country. In Egypt, they have that. It was free. By the way, they tested, I visited the 10,000 individual centers, a few, but average people were doing the blood sticks. There were 10,000 throughout the country. They would do the blood tests. They were testing you for diabetes. They were testing you for obesity. And the treatments were free. If you had diabetes, they would treat you for free.
Yeah.
And they did something else that was very clever. They sent a rumor around that unless you had a piece of paper that said, I've been tested, you couldn't get a driver's license. It wasn't true. And my friends, I can tell you, I was with a rich group of friends, they all had drivers. They were the first ones to be tested. Later, they had everybody got tested. So they tested everybody in the country and eliminated the disease. It's a wonderful thing to see that you can eliminate such terrible diseases.
Well, let's turn to another disease, infectious disease, that has not been eliminated, and that's HIV/AIDS. And you were an early crusader in the fight against HIV/AIDS. And you were a scientist, you were an activist, you were trying to get the word out about this terrible disease. And you were one of the first to kind of understand the importance of voices like Elizabeth Taylor for, raising money and public funds for AIDS research. You said the reason scientists were able to work on HIV was because there was already a huge investment in cancer. Can you explain this? And it's an example of a lot of firsts, right? HIV. Yeah.
Well, it's not, as you said, it's not over. But it's been a wonderful story in a way. It came and a lot of people had it, especially in New York City. A whole generation of our creative talent died.
Yeah.
It was pretty devastating. But my ability to contribute scientifically came from something called the Special Virus Cancer Program. And I was talking to somebody about that program. And a lot of the government infrastructure work, basically my whole career was made possible because there was NIH funding for young scientists. And particularly when the idea was we're going to cure cancer with a vaccine. Cancer is caused by viruses. And although that didn't turn out to be entirely true, it started a whole field where we had the expertise. So when I was first working on HTLV1, on retroviruses, And then when HIV came along, I thought, oh, this probably is it. I was one of the only persons who were doing it. And so we sequenced the virus, a first, as a matter of fact. We found all these targets. And then I helped, I was an advisor. Many of you know Tony Fauci is famous for COVID. But before that, he was very famous for HIV, and some of you that worked for him. And we got, with Elizabeth Taylor's help, I went and lobbied Congress, and we increased the budget from $1 million to $390 million in one supplemental, and now it's about $2 billion. But I can tell you, before there was money, government money to work on it, it was not an interesting problem. Some people, all of you know very well, where I gave one of my best postdocs, I said, will you hire him as a professor? And said, AIDS is not a problem we're interested in. It's not an interesting problem. Why? There was no money. The moment there was money, it became a very interesting problem, and people began to fight. That was a real lesson for me. If you put money, they will come. Okay? And what then happened is I also realized it was more than that. It was a social problem. People were afraid. And most of you are too young to remember that fear. But
yeah.
I was part of a group called the AIDS Crisis Trust in Great Britain. And Princess Diana was one of our spokespeople.
Yeah.
And we convinced her that she should hold an AIDS baby and hug an AIDS man. And you probably remember those images.
Yes.
That changed
Very
AIDS,
well.
believe it or not, around the world. That one, maybe as much as science did. We now have a lot of drugs, and we have some that work really well, like one drug can protect you from getting infected for maybe 6 months. But there's a great interaction between science and the public. And you saw it in COVID. You lived all through that interaction and that complex interaction between science and the public. And AIDS was sort of like that, but at this point, there are some countries, Botswana, for example, that's eliminated HIV, just like hepatitis C. They decided as a country they're going to eliminate it, and they were able to do it. And we were happy to provide them with the tools, both the medical tools and the social infrastructure tools. One thing about Access Health that I realized as being the CEO of a biotech company is that we can come up with a lot of solutions, but they wouldn't actually benefit most of the people in the country because the healthcare systems weren't equitable. They weren't reaching people. I remember I was on the board of a company that was created by the Gates Foundation called One World Health. And we created a drug for leishmaniasis that would cure leishmaniasis, puromycin, an old antibiotic. We got it approved in India. But nobody got the drug because Bihar, where that is, had no infrastructure to deliver that drug. The healthcare system is not only important to have drugs that are affordable, it's got to be accessible.
Yes.
And unfortunately, in our country, we have great disparities in healthcare access. And a friend of mine who ran a big hospital system in India summarized it this way. He said, governments look at healthcare as a responsibility. The private sector looks at it as an opportunity. Okay, now we're a special piece of the healthcare industry. We're a small little piece up here in biotech. Okay, we're not the pharma companies, which are themselves a small piece of healthcare. The real cost of healthcare are healthcare delivery. That is the huge cost, and we haven't, unfortunately, yet in the United States. I read a book on the Singapore healthcare system. Why? For 4.5% of GDP, they get the world best outcomes. You just went to Singapore, and it's an amazing place. Part of it's social, the determinants of health, which we talk about, but a lot of it is healthcare access. And it's just not accessible for many people. And as a result of that, in my own lifetime, from being at the top of the pile in healthcare outcomes, we're now 36 about the Dominican Republic, which is not good, by the way. And that's not because you and I can't get health care. It's because most of our fellow citizens don't get good health care. And it's not that it's not around. When I was advising the dean of the Rush, the people who went to his healthcare system did very well. 5 subway stops away, they died 20 years early of all sorts of diseases. That's social determinants of health.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things I learned is that it's not about only having drugs, you need those, but you need a healthcare system like in Egypt, which is accessible. They can give those drugs for free to people.
Yeah, that's an
and,
important.
And it really
yeah.
give them to. And
Yeah.
everybody over the age of 12 was tested and treated.
Yeah, no, that's an extraordinary story, and I think that's a great thing about, founding a company and being a CEO of the company, right? Like you were CEO of Human Genome Sciences, where you were responsible for creating like the entire encyclopedia of expressed human DNA, which included more than 500 million distinct sequences. I mean, can you explain like the impact that company had on the early use of genetics?
I can tell you what it was like at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that is, people would come to me and I had just sequenced HIV. And I realized having the sequence was such a powerful tool because very quickly you could translate that into a protein, and that protein could be a target for a drug. And actually working with the NIH, I got grants put together, which 2/3 of it went to a company, and then 1/3 of it went to the academic, if there was a tie that they would do the work and the drug company would develop the drug.
Yeah.
And that is actually how one of the things started. But when you have the sequence, the way we looked at it is you have a lead for a drug. Now, part of the public perception was, oh, we're going to answer all medical questions, and we're going to immediately have drugs. No, the idea was we'll give starting points.
Yes.
Now, it's hard to imagine before the Human Genome Project that there were only about 100 to 150 starting points. And those are all the drugs you can divide. Once we had all the genes and we know which tissue they express and which there isn't, and people would come to me and say, well, Bill, you're going to find all these genes, even if they're expressed genes, it's, maybe 100,000, maybe 50,000, turned out to be a lot less than that. You're going to find them all. But what are you going to do with it? Especially the geneticists. Mm-hmm. Geneticists believe that the key to success is genetics. I used to give a talk that said, genomics isn't necessarily genetics. Genomics might be anatomy. Genomics might be pathology. Genomics might tell you where to look for a new target, but it isn't going to get you the drug. The way I thought about that is, what I'll do is, we'll find most of the genes, and if there's 7 transmembrane receptors, or if they're this or that, we'll do a pharmaceutical partner. But we will concentrate on the the proteins that have signal peptides that are likely to make a cell do something. So a cell is kind of interesting. A cell can sit there and just metabolize. It can differentiate. It can live. It can die. It can move. It can not move. But there's not a whole lot of things it can do. It can activate a program. And those are usually signals that come from outside. And most of the signals are proteins. So we thought, well, those are going to be drugs. And it turned out, the first one we found, we had a simple assay, had 2,000 signal peptide proteins. And we had the RNA, and we could make a little bit of protein, and then we tested those as a very specialized library, and that worked. Mm. And we got a couple of nice drugs out of that.
Yeah.
One of the things, I'm sad to say, that I think our company was the very first one to make a long-acting GLP-1 drug. In fact, the first company to make a GLP-1 drug. Okay? And I had done a lot of research. I thought, well, GLP-1, that's appetite. You eat a meal. And why does GLP-1? You might not know that, but the reason it works, it makes you feel a little bit nauseous. Mm-hmm. I want you all to think about what you feel like after you've had a big meal. Yeah, you feel a little bit of tension here, but also for that food just doesn't look so good. Yeah. And that's because you're slightly nauseated. Food aversion is the word for it. Okay? Food aversion. And but it turns out it's a wonderful drug for diabetes because even if you overdose, your sugar level never goes too low. Mm. And Lilly had developed a drug was like it, from a Gila monster protein. Mm-hmm. So I thought, gee, if you get the real human drug, but it only lasts for seconds in your blood. So we wanted to make it live longer. So we created a drug called gluten is what the name was. And it's just a fusion with albumin. Worked fine. It got approved by the FDA 30 years ago. Yeah. And I said, hey, guys, appetite. No, it makes people nauseous. We're not going to do that drug. It makes people nauseous. In fact, we even gave up on it. Yeah. So they had the drug 30 years ago, and they had advice from me. But that also tells you that, you can only do so much.
Yeah.
Okay?
you can
I'm
only
not
do
going to
so much.
manufacture and sell that drug, especially if another company had the rights to it.
Yeah.
But they should have.
Yeah.
And for any of you who are interested, it's still off the shelf. It's an approved FDA product, dropped by GlaxoSmithKline, available, no patent. Make some formulation of it, and start your company, and there you go. I'll help you. I am pissed off. I tell that story at dinner parties, and nobody believes me. Oh yeah, sure. You invented the first GLP drug. Sure you did. But we did. You got to look it up. Albugluten.
So you were before your time. That's what it was. Yes.
It's interesting that it was Eli Lilly that's come up with this drug because they are really a leader in GLP.
Yeah.
They had a Gila monster protein. Now, do anybody know what a Gila monster is? Raise your hand if you know. I call it a Judith Lieber bag of a lizard. It's all beaded with multiple colors, but it's got poison, and one of the poisons is, one of the proteins is a GLP-like protein. And they did make it long-lived, and that is one of the GLP-1 drugs. They did a very good job.
Yeah.
But they've had like 50 years of experience with it.
Yeah, that helps. Well, switching gears for a bit, in a recent Scientific American article, you wrote that the critical difference between COVID-19 and AIDS is both are terrible diseases, is that COVID-19 can actually be controlled by public health means. What did you mean by that, and why does it continue to be difficult with HIV/AIDS?
First of all, sexual behavior is among the hardest types of behavior to control in human beings. You know that? I know that. Think of yourself. We all know that sexual behavior is very hard to change. And I think that's one reason for it. And the second thing is, it's transmitted in a silent form. And it would take 10 years to die.
Yeah.
And when you get it at first, it's just like an infection. Oh, I've got an infection. Get over it. But 5 years later, it's a terrible disease, and it's much more lethal than most other diseases. If untreated, it's 98% lethal.
Yeah.
Doesn't kill everybody, but kills most people. And what other disease do you know that's so lethal? Almost none. So once it gets into a population, a place like Botswana, you can control it. And the way you control it it's also not vaccinatable. Okay? And I predicted, again,
many failed trials, clinical trials.
I remember I was the second International AIDS Convention in Paris. And I was giving a keynote lecture about the virus and what we knew about it. And then I said, I'll give you two observations. First of all, I've measured the B cell response, antibodies to HIV, and they're sky high. They're higher than we've ever seen before. I've measured the T cell responses, and they're higher than we've ever seen before. We've never seen that before. If your body can't eliminate it, there's nothing we know in vaccinology that's going to let you eliminate this disease. Your immune system's working overtime. And so my prediction is we don't have the technology to make a vaccine now, and we don't know when we will, if ever.
Yeah.
That's different from COVID.
Yes.
COVID, we did get a vaccine. And our vaccines could be better than they are, but they were pretty effective.
Yeah.
At least over the short term.
Yeah.
And the mRNA technologies were fabulous.
Yeah.
And they protect you for 3 or 4 months anyway, and that made a big, big difference, especially to people my age. Okay? For some of the people in the audience, it's not such a big deal, but anybody over 70, it was a big deal. It saved like 80, 90% of those people.
Yes, many
That's
lives,
one thing.
yes.
The other big difference is there was a very specific group targeted, gay and black, in America. Those are our favorite groups. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
Okay? And so that made it more difficult to deal with. You said it's your fault. A lot of people say, and I used to say, but in Africa, it's a heterosexual disease.
Yeah.
It is not a disease that's caused by behavior. It's sexual behavior, which is part of life. And a lot of trouble with that.
Stigma, a lot of
stigma with that.
Yes.
And in my autobiography, I have this scene. It's a funny scene. I'm there with Elizabeth Taylor, who we're going to lobby Congress. She and I are together. And she was just out of the rehab. And so she looked pretty good. She'd lost about 50 pounds and was all in her Chanel, and she looked good. And so we're going through, and she said, I'm going to introduce, she said, Bill, I'm going to introduce you to my stupidest husband. I said, what? Yeah, Senator Warner. Huh? He's the most unintelligent husband I've had. But we're going to have lunch, and after lunch we're going to talk about the need for HIV/AIDS. And I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to say yes. I said, but suppose I would say no. He said, you're going to say yes. And you're not going to say no to Elizabeth Taylor. So we're sitting around, and we're talking about AIDS, and there was all this, I think every senator we talked to was now dead. But these were like Barry Goldwater and Wilbur Mills and the real old war horses in the Senate, the conservative ones. And they're the ones that had to vote yes on this. Yeah. So we AIDS is this, AIDS is that, AIDS is transmissible. AIDS is sexually transmissible, yes. AIDS is transmitted by a blowjob. I looked at her, and I remembered I had to say yes, so I said yes, but the answer is no. But I said yes, and that was worth about $300 million. Because at that point, all these old guys woke up. And it's not necessarily a kiddie story, but it's a true story. And that gives you an idea of what people thought about AIDS in those days.
Wow, wow, mind-boggling, I'm speechless.
Sometimes you have to say maybe a little white lie.
Yeah, but we were talking about mRNA vaccines and how effective they were. Why do you think there was a lot of trust issues with mRNA vaccines as well, right? So why do you think they're better than our, the older technologies, and what can we expect in the future with,
Well, they certainly worked well for us.
Yeah.
And Biotech and Pfizer and Moderna did a wonderful job. And they made lots of it. It was free, and it didn't cost the government. It cost the government something, but not a lot. And those companies made a lot of money, and now they're figuring out what to do, right? So yeah. It's both been a great benefit. It's a little bit difficult for them. Yeah. But there's something about RNA which I like. And one of the things I think that's happening is we're in a really interesting transition, where the DNA revolution that gave us antibodies and proteins and hepatitis B vaccines and all sorts of things has a catch, and that is proteins are expensive to make. And anybody in this audience who's making proteins knows they're expensive to make. You have a huge amount of, who knows how much stainless steel. I've built protein production factories. It's expensive. And the cheapest you can get a vaccine or a protein made is maybe $400 or $500 a kilogram if you're really in India and you're very efficient. Usually it's a lot more than that. Now, if you're going to charge $20,000 a drug, that's not a problem. But if it costs $10 a drug, it is a problem. Yeah. And so a lot of the drugs that are very expensive can be, it's because of the intrinsic cost.
The cost of making
RNA is very cheap to make. I'm an advisor to a company in India that actually manufactures billions of doses of vaccine in a room half this size. Now, that isn't the final product, but that is what you would replace. For, I say, $50,000, $100,000, you can replace the manufacture of RNA. It's a chemical process. It's not, you're not growing it up. It's cheap, really cheap. And then the plant to make it is just a bottling and processing plant. That's maybe 1/10 the cost of the other plant. So that does cost something, like maybe $50 billion for a couple of billion doses a year. That's not even very much. So if we can replace our protein and antibody drugs with RNA, terrific. If we can change your own cells, and there are 5 or 6 examples now that I've written about where you can give an injection, change the cell in the person, and that cell will have a beneficial effect. Let me give an example of Alnylam, which you all know is a silencing RNA company. Those are direct injections. It's a lipid nanoparticle, goes into your bloodstream, gets into your liver, and turns off a gene that otherwise would cause you trouble. That's what we're talking about. That's allogeneic. That's not allogeneic. That's autologous. The big problem with all these brand new, I really am a fan of CAR T therapies and all the new therapies that are using your cells now to fight the cancer. The problem is they only work if I take your cell, modify it, and give it back
Put
to
it back,
you.
yeah.
Right?
That's
about $1
Yeah.
million right there.
correct.
In the American healthcare system,
Yes.
right? The most expensive location with the most expensive labor,
Yep.
and it's individual one at a time.
Yep.
Who can afford that,
Yeah.
right? But if I gave you a $10 shot that cost me $2 to make, it can be available to anybody. That's why I'm really excited about it.
That's
I think we're not quite there yet. We don't know exactly how to get it to the right cell. Liver is one thing, but getting it to your brain, getting it to your T cells or those cells, people are working on that. I'm writing an article right now for Precision Medicine on the importance of in vivo injection to get around the problems of autologous transplants. We're almost there. I mean, you can do some really neat things,
That's
like
exciting.
alnylam hooks a sugar to the end of its RNA, and that homes into the right liver thing. Or people are now putting antibodies on liposomes to carry the liposomes.
Yeah.
But that same liposome gets into your liver too. So now they have to mask it. So I mean, we're getting there, and hopefully somebody in this audience will be the one that does that. It's going to be a wonderful thing to do.
That's a call to
there'll be a bunch
action.
of different solutions,
Yeah.
and there are some, but it's coming.
No, that's really exciting if one could do that, because CAR T, it's all the rage, but it's
CAR T is
hugely
hugely
expensive,
and it's got a lot of side effects. And CAR T it's somewhere on the way.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's in the right direction.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of improvements needed. But that's true of any technology.
Yes,
almost
that's right.
any.
Yeah. It's like the mainframe computer compared to the laptop.
Yeah, but I think that the reason I'm excited is not only is it a wonderful technology, but it has a component of accessibility, which we talked about at the beginning.
In the beginning, yeah. So Time Magazine called you the one of the 25 most influential global business executives, right? What skills do you believe all new founders and CEOs should have today? Well, to go from the lab to the boardroom and to FDA approval.
Well, it's when I was doing the transition from being an academic to being a CEO, people would say, "Why do you think you can be a CEO?" And I said, "What do you think a biotech startup CEO is?" Okay, and they said, "Well," I said, "We have to find the ideas. We have to get the people to do it. We have to get the money to do it. We have to convince other people that it's a good idea so they give us more money. And then, because you're at a university, they're crummy at accounting, by the way, you might know that. I had to set up my own accounting group. I had like 30 or 40 students. I said, what's the difference? There is a difference, though.
Yeah.
And the difference is when you come to sell. Sales and marketing take very special skills. And most of it, I can't claim I'm one of them, have those skills. There are some people that are really good at it. And I remember telling a very specific thought right now, and that is the flu vaccine. I remember this guy, fantastic, he had $1 billion committed by the US government. If there was a terrible flu epidemic, they would get it, and he had a great story. But the problem was, I said, this is a wonderful story. How come I can't go to the pharmacy and get your flu vaccine? Yeah. I said, you need the guy who actually does that.
Yeah.
That's who should be running your company at this point. You've actually got the technical part solved.
Yeah.
So there's some things, and since I knew I wasn't good at that, I could convince people with things. And for all of you, one thing I used to tell my friends, we sell hope. We don't sell drugs.
Yeah.
Okay? We sell hope. That's really saleable.
Yeah.
Once you sell drugs, you need the nitty-gritty people on the ground.
Yeah.
And I knew that that wasn't my skill.
Yeah.
So we all have different kinds of skills.
Yes. And it takes all kinds.
That's something that you should all be aware of when it comes to manufacturing. You can probably do, but once you get to sales, it's a very different story. Just try to sell anything against. First of all, you all know from your own experience, easy to buy. So instant gratification. You have money, you buy it, I bought it, I got it. Very, very hard to sell. Very hard to sell anything. And there are people who are really good at that.
That's great advice. That's really great. So how did you manage it? Like, did you hire somebody who was good at sales?
Bought.
Yeah. You got bought, yes. So you didn't.
There are some companies, there are a few people. I knew the CEO of Gilead. And he was very good at it. And the guys who ran Genentech were very, very good at it. They eventually got bought, but they were good at getting products and so on. So there are some people who have both skills.
Yes.
The guy that ran Gilead, actually built up Gilead, was, I think he was a Bristol Myers scientist who worked on HIV drugs, and he had the right instincts. And I got to know him pretty well, and he was one of the rare people who could do both. And there are a few people like that.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good advice. You know, final question. In many of your books, right, you talk about key strategies that are deployed by companies as they work to eradicate disease, and hopefully, you know, move towards a world where you can emphasize well care versus sick care. I mean, can you give us a little highlight on what that means globally?
Yeah. The way, I think, for example, the J&J Foundation that people are very interested in, and that works now on social determinants of health. And it turns out, if you actually look at how it comes, about 80% of your lifetime health is not dependent on the healthcare system. It's dependent on your social circumstance. And you know that intrinsically if you're in a poor country without good services, but even in rich countries, and that's what I was mentioning with my experience in Chicago, and even in this city. Whether you live long, whether you're healthy, if you get sick, you have access. And for me, well, I tell my friends, the difference between me and not knowing me is 6 hours or 6 months of wait time to see the right doctor. And even then, you might not see the right doctor. So even for people who are knowledgeable and well-educated and are wealthy, you might not even get the best care you need. We have a very, very complex system. And if you're not socially connected, you can't get to the right place. And sometimes you will die because you're not being treated properly. And so that's part of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And there are, you know, one of the things my foundation does is talks to, insofar as we can, government leaders to deliver health care for everybody. I wrote another book, and I've studied this at various places, but one of them is on eye care, but it wasn't on eye care. This one was about emergency care in India. Now, you might think it's a terrible place to get emergency care because the city traffic is terrible and there's a lot of rural communities that are hard to reach. It turns out, this a friend of mine has developed, he ran an information tech company, and he developed a system which is a free ambulance system. He has Stanford professors provide the technology and the education. At this point, they've educated maybe 300,000 ambulance experts, and it's free to the user. One call center is for 50 million people. It costs them $20 per pickup. That's the real cost per pickup. And they've saved probably about 5 million lives by now in India. But if you're wealthy, you don't even know about it. You just don't use it. It's because of the caste system and other systems. You don't want to get into an ambulance that somebody else has been in from the wrong caste. All right? So it works. It works extremely well. And McKinsey did a study and said if we in the United States used a similar effect, we'd save 200 times our money on ambulance services. I ask you, any one of you walk outside, you get hit by a car, where are they going to take you? The answer is the police are going to take you to the local hospital. That's their instruction. Unless you call and say, I want to go to the New York Presbyterian or I want to go to NYU, you're not going to get there. You're going to go to some place and who knows if they have the right thing to save you or not. So part of it, and so we try to advise governments.
Yeah.
Okay, we try to look at best practices. But I had an experience I'll never forget. There's something you might relate to. I had my book, fresh off the press, The Healthcare System of Singapore, very efficient. I said, this is wonderful advice. And I was at a party with Mike Bloomberg, and I had the book with me, and I handed him this book. I said, here's a book about this. She said, why do you think anybody in this country wants to read that book, Bill? That was the right answer. Nobody in this country wanted to read the book. There are doctors in India who do 2,000 open heart surgeries a year. We do 50. There are physicians that I've seen work doing 50 cataract surgeries a day for a cost of $20 a cataract surgery. Free to 60% of the people there and subsidized by the other 40% that pay a little bit for it. Okay? Do we want to do that? We invented all that technology, but we don't do it. Nobody does that. And that is a problem.
That is, yes.
That is a problem. We can be efficient if we have an incentive to be efficient, but our incentives, in my mind, aren't aligned. And our other countries, I can tell you, I've worked in 5 or 6 countries. You want to work in a different country? Try Morocco. Now, that might be the first country you think of. It's difficult. But they have French administration and Arab government. It's a mess, total mess. You know, everybody's corrupt. You can't get things here.
We have Saad from Morocco listening carefully, yes.
You agree. It's a mess. Right, but I can tell you, I had the health ministers and the ministers helping me, and even the princess helping us, and we couldn't get through all the red tape. Even to get glasses imported into Morocco, it was horrible. So it's a big problem.
It's a big, yes.
And we're not going to solve it tonight.
Yes.
But what you guys can do is at least find some workable solutions to some medical problems. You get them to a point where it's worthwhile, and if you have the right skills, I think it's a very important skill, that it's something that you're doing here, which is really important, is communication skills.
Yes.
It's so important, as one of the themes throughout this whole talk is communication.
Yes.
And the responsibility of scientists. You know, we scientists and people who are in this are given a great gift. We've been educated. We didn't create the education system. We didn't learn this. We've been, and many of us have been mentored by these wonderful people. But we are a social luxury, right? We're not feeding people every day. We're not building houses. We're a luxury item on the agenda, which, thank God, people like our luxury. You know, think of you as a Birkin bag. People support us because we do something they think, but you have a responsibility too to your own society, to people who are poorer than you, and a lot of that is communication. A communication about what you do, why people need it. It's really important to work with your government leaders and people in the media, for example, to give messages. Very important to develop those skills. I was very fortunate in high school. I had a good debate coach.
Yeah, yeah.
And it helped.
It helps.
Gives you confidence.
Yes, absolutely.
It really helps.
Yeah.
The communication about what you're doing, why it's important, is really vital to get the kind of support we as a luxury item need.
That's an important skill to have. I'm sure the audience has many questions, so I want to turn to the audience. Questions? Michael? Yes.
Hi, sir. Son? Oh, hi, sir. I'm Michael Banyas. I'm from the National Institutes of Minority Health and Health Disparities. One question I have is that our former director, Francis Collins, said in one of his exit interviews, I think 60 Minutes, that one of the things that caught him off guard and that he was worried about the fight of disease was vaccine hesitancy, particularly with areas that weren't traditionally suffering from health disparities, such as people that had lack of access to education, or there were cultural competency issues, but now among the well-educated and well-educated in wealthier classes. And I didn't know what your feeling was about this and what you and your colleagues have discussed, because in the long term, the more and more people are hesitant against not only newer medical technologies, but also vaccines, it's going to spark up a rise in disease that we had almost eradicated previously.
Like measles, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, certainly we've all been through it. There's a couple of different ways to answer the question, but one of them that I would say is the moment you hook an issue to real politics, power politics, and money, you have a problem. Because there's immediately going to be divisions. Everybody is fighting like hell over money. And we're not talking about a little bit of money. We're talking about entire industries and great fortunes. And when you hook an issue like vaccination to those kinds of issues, you have a problem that is way beyond any answer, technical answer. And there's another problem with communication. I'll give you a sort of analogy. It's not quite the same. But Switzerland had a referendum many years ago on recombinant DNA. Should it be allowed in Switzerland? And they, of course, are economy largely, not largely, but somewhat dependent upon the pharmaceutical companies, right? Sandoz and a lot of other companies are there. And so they put their famous scientists up front on television. And I remember driving through Switzerland, seeing hay bales piled up to say NON, none. We're not going to go for it. And that was the problem. They then hired a professional PR firm to go and talk to people. And within 2 months, it passed 60 to 30. So it passed. They were able to do recombinant DNA. So it's a question also who's communicating. That's one answer. One is just pure politics. The other, scientists are particularly, in general, poor communicators. And one of the reasons is we know that there's no such thing as truth. Okay? And if we know anything, we know that the answer, what I tell people is, yeah, you write a paper and it's got the answer. And if it's a good paper, you can reproduce the data. But don't believe the conclusion. Because we know it's a small part of a greater truth. And everything you think is the truth is not. For example, I'll give you an example I learned yesterday. Some RNAs are stable for your entire life in your brain. Okay? Who knew? This molecule could fall apart. Same molecule was there when you're born, is there when you're 80. So that's a piece of thing that you've never heard of before. I never heard of that before. I always heard it falls apart right away. That's why it's RNA, not DNA. But that is some, we package it, we do something to it to make it live a long time. Well, we know that. And you can't say something for sure is true. And I think that's the other problem, is scientists, first of all, aren't, they're in their laboratory a lot of times. But even if you're used to talking and getting investors, you're not used to talking to the general public. And you have to admire politicians that are successful, that know how to measure every single syllable of what they say. Because they say something unguarded. Look what they've done to Joe Biden when he stumbles over his words. I mean, every single word has to be there. It's an amazing talent that most people don't have. Now, is this going to be a real problem? Yeah, it is going to be a problem in the faith in science and what you all are doing. But when you get right down to it, when people get sick, they want to be able to help. And if it's a family member, they generally want help. And I think that over time will be a saving grace if you can help people.
I think one thing that I noticed, aside from, I think you've written more books in your lifetime than I've read in the last 2 years, and maybe that's just a product of having kids, is that it's just
Read some more.
No, but it's just not scientific books, but with, science as a superpower and a family guide to COVID, that you've got a special talent in communicating at different levels in different cultural competencies the importance of health and disease. So that was something I took away, and that's why I thought the question was appropriate.
Very kind of you to say. Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Yeah.
Stand up. Okay. Sorry. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Meeti Kalra, and I work at Makovsky. We're a PR agency, so thank you so much for highlighting the importance of communications. Helps us out. You'll see a LinkedIn post about it. I was wondering, when I talk to a lot of CEOs and founders, and we talk about the need for communications, especially in this kind of economic environment, they say, well, we're not ready for PR yet. When would you suggest a company get ready for PR? And that's someone internal or external. When would you advise that they hire somebody?
At the very beginning. You need good PR at the very beginning. First of all, when you have an idea, you have to convince people. What is PR really? It's convincing people. It's sales. It's convincing people. I said earlier, what you have to sell is hope. We're a species that lives on hope, right? We all know we're going to die. We hope we're not going to die soon. But we hope in so many different ways. And so what we have are things that are people's lives, their own lives, the ones they love, are dear to them. And they hope that they're going to survive whatever happens. And they know the things are going to happen. Each one of us has had something happen to us. And the ones we love have all had something happen to them. And so I think at the very beginning, you have to understand how what you do fits into what people need. What makes a business? Giving people something that they think they need, right? Not necessarily that they really need, but that they think they need. And that's where the translation comes in. You're doing something that's valuable, but nobody will believe it's valuable. Like, I remember when I was sequencing all the human genes, the messenger RNAs, everybody said, oh, those aren't going to be valuable. You're not going to know what it does. Well, I said, you give me one gene, I can sequence it. I can tell you where it's expressed. I can tell you where it's not expressed. I can tell you what happens to an animal if I knock it out. I can do all those things with one gene. Why can't I do them with 20,000 genes? No reason, especially with robots. But you have to give them a reason. It's valuable. And then, depends who they are that your audience is. For most companies that are starting out, they need money. And to need money, you're going to have to, there's a very simple equation in all of our lives. You give me money, but you give me back more. I give you money, you give me back more. That's basically the deal that we're all living in who create companies. That's the fundamental deal. So you've got to convince them that if they give you money, you're going to give them back something more. There are very few people who are going to give you money just because out of the kindness of their hearts. Most people give you money because they want more back. So PR is very important for that.
Yes. Well, thank you all very much for being a great audience, and thank you, Bill. This was a really awesome conversation, and yes,
Well,
you can see all of the books over there, on the screen.
Right.
Very nice, and thank you for highlighting the importance of communications, and really
That's why I
appreciate.
write books. It's important for people to
Yes,
know.
thank you. And of course, to all of you on LinkedIn and on Stream, we'll see you next week when we talk with Dr. Nicholas Boulis, who's a co-founder of Brain Trust. It's a company working on new solution on how to better distribute ALS medications to try and extend patients' lives. Thank you all for joining, and thank you.